Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Here to Edify. I am your host, Astrid, and this is episode 18.
Here to edify.
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 To edify.
With more and more adults struggling to build deep, meaningful connections, Kristen KB Newton, today's guest, has created a practical framework and heart combos to help navigate the tensions that exist in relationships, specifically friendship. KB looks forward to having the conversations that matter with you, as she has with many others who have joined her membership, learned the framework, and are having their own heart combos. So I want to thank you for coming on and just taking the time to talk with me. And I want to start with just asking, what is heart combos?
That's a great question, Astrid. And thank you so much for having me here in your space. It's my pleasure. Okay, so a heart combo is really the only conversation I think worth having. And so a lot of people don't actually know that HEART is an acronym. And so it stands for honest, elephant-sized, authentic, real, and transparent. And then convos is just short for conversation. And so heart combos are just conversations that I champion, that I encourage people to have, specifically in the context of friendship. Because for some reason, we save these 5 conversations for relationships that are romantic or relationships that are familial. When it comes to friendship, we kind of gloss over practicing these 5 things. So if you like, I can break down what each one is.
I would love that. Yes, please.
Okay, so when you're having a heart convo, H is for honest. And so that means you're just having a conversation that's free of deceit. You are being truthful, right? You are not embellishing, and you're also not kind of underplaying the situation either, right? You're being honest about what it is. Elephant size is my favorite. It is about pointing out the elephant in the room. So that thing that everybody sees that nobody wants to talk about, that can be an elephant size conversation, or a conversation that is larger than life. So you could be talking to someone about something that's just huge, or, just extremely weighty. That could be an elephant sized conversation. An authentic conversation is one where you feel the freedom to show up as your most authentic self with no pretense. A real conversation has nothing to do with like being real, but more to do with addressing real issues in real time. And so we're not talking about what happened 3 months ago. We're talking about the issue right now, what's on the table, which is, again, sometimes hard for folks to do. And then lastly, transparent conversations are ones where you allow people to see into the things that they would not be able to see otherwise, unless you expose it. So that can be anything from your expectations, your boundaries, your hopes, your dreams, your fears. Like, we don't know those things unless you tell us what they are. So those are what the 5 letters stand for. And those are the only conversations I think that are worth having. They're hard combos.
So I really love that, because when I think about just my own experience with friendship, it's something I've had to like grow into, where you're constantly falling down, messing up, or, and then it's like, oh, okay, I shouldn't do that. And as you were saying, there's a lot of emphasis on romantic relationships or familial, but I believe it is just the regular friendships that really are our growing ground to really be
Absolutely.
successful in those.
I agree 100%. 100%. I have, I did a TED talk a couple years ago, and in the space I said, if you're not a good friend, you won't be a good boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, ministry leader, coworker, boss. Like, you just, the foundations of healthy friendships can be, or the key components of a foundation of a healthy friendship can be found in every other relationship. I think friendships are the safest space to practice, to your point. But a lot of times people don't see it that way.
Definitely. So it makes me wonder, for you specifically, like, what historically has been your relationship with friendship?
My relationship with friendship. So I was a trash friend for a very long time. Like, I was not the friend that was filling the bucket of other friends. I felt like in the spaces that I existed, in the communities that I was connected to, there was such an unawareness of my own self, my own story, my own narrative, my own triggers and traumas and hangups, and hurt, that unawareness really impacted how I was able to attach to other people. So in some situations, it was just very toxic and, again, not healthy. But in other spaces, it was kind of out of a desperation, and I would cling to, relationships in a way that again wasn't healthy. And so for a long time, I was just dropping the ball. And to you said earlier, that constant, stumbling, standing up, stumbling, standing up, trying to get a rhythm of walking and just feeling like I can't do this. And because every person isn't the same, right? It's not like, oh, if I figure out how to be a friend with you, I can be a friend with anybody. Like every single person brings a different thing to the table. I realized at one point that I was going to have to get some tools under my belt that were going to exceed not just this specific relationship, but every relationship that I would have. They have to be. It can't just be true with you and I. It has to be true with every relationship dynamic. And once I stumbled upon some of those principles, I was like, oh, this is creating so much freedom for me to again be my most authentic self, show up honestly, not to feel like I have to, you know, dumb myself down or water myself down or hide in the shadows or, dim any of my light, in order to, you know, do this relationship authentically. So I hope that kind of answers it. Does it answer your question a little bit?
Definitely. No, I appreciate it. Cause I mean, you say it, but like, yeah, if many of us would be honest, we would probably say too, no, I have been trash. That's just what it is when you don't know what you're doing. And that is unfortunate. But I think that's why it's amazing what you're doing, because it's like, we don't have to be.
No. And that's the beautiful thing. It doesn't really matter where anyone is in their friendship journey. You can grow into a healthier friend. You know what I mean? You can grow into being a better friend. It's not over for you. Where I did believe that at one point in my life, I did believe that, you know what? I got this bubbly personality. I'm super animated. Like people are drawn to me. However, I will just do life on the surface with people if that keeps them from being hurt by me or, me blowing up anybody else's life or me being hurt. And so I think there are a lot of people walking around like that thinking, I don't really know how to do deep. So I'm just going to master this surface thing, and just kind of keep it moving. And after a while, that just becomes so unsatisfying. It's like the older you get, the more you realize, like, I need deep, meaningful connections. And I think we know that we need deep, meaningful connections our whole life. We just convince ourselves in certain seasons that, well, maybe I don't need this. Maybe I'll be better all by myself. Or maybe, it's just me and Jesus, if you believe in Jesus, or maybe, it's just me and my bae, me and my boo. I got bae, I done figured it out. I got my kids, like I'm straight. And it's listen, I just heard a doctor say the other day that his definition of loneliness is the gap between the relationships you have and the relationships you need, and or want. And so you could have a great marriage. You could have great kids. You know what I'm saying? Your family could be awesome. But if there's a relationship dynamic that you need that you don't have, that's where loneliness exists in that space. And I think a lot of people are finding themselves missing those types of connections in friendship.
Yeah, that's amazing. But just like, yeah, what that doctor said, like, wow, I love things that kind of stops you and you're like, that's good. So in lieu of all of these things that you're saying, what was it for you that was like, I don't want to just be a better friend, but I want other people to be better friends. And so, yeah, like I want to foster that in others.
I think so. Just straight out of college, I actually ended up going into missions full time. And so I was like, you know what? I really have a burden for the inner city, particularly teenagers in the context of the inner city. So I went to work for a nonprofit organization and raised support for 7 years. And I was in that space and ran an after school program, and we threw parties for kids, like, throughout the school year. And we just tried to find creative ways to draw kids in the context of the city to our space. And we would build relationships with them. We would earn the right to be heard, and we would, eventually, share the gospel with them, talk about Jesus' love and all things. So that's what I did for that set of years straight out of college. But then life took a random turn, as is my life random. And I actually ended up being a part of a music group who actually had a relationship with a label, and we ended up cutting records and touring for a season. And then once that ended, then I transitioned into being a DJ full time. Again, why did I go to college? I don't know. I went to Virginia Tech to be an architect, and I am a DJ, right? In the entertainment space, I'm an official DJ for the Indiana Pacers. I've been doing that for the last 7 years. And so I go from this, end of the table, inner city, people don't know that these people, these kids exist, to now I'm in the entertainment space, and I'm seeing celebrities and on the court and basketball players and, running into LeBron in the parking garage and like little like things like that, right? And the thing that I noticed from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum is that everybody's longing for the same thing, to be connected to something, to be seen, to feel love, joy, um, acceptance. You know what I mean? They want a safe space to be vulnerable, and neither end of the spectrum know how to cultivate that. On one end, there's a lack of connection. Like there's not even like the options don't even seem to be there of people, to reach out to that could offer that. But then people who quote unquote have it all are also finding that what they're longing for can't be found in their money and status and things. And so they feel, again, loneliness piece, lonely amidst all of the, everybody sees you, everybody knows your name, but you still don't feel known and seen. And so I think in seeing that and seeing the brokenness in both spaces, I just got to a place where I was like, I can relate to both sides, and I really want to see people thrive in their relationships, because I just kept hearing the same stories over and over again. I kept seeing women falling out with each other, and lifelong friendships since we were 12, dissipating, over a missed expectation, over a cross boundary, you know what I mean? And I'm like, we listen, like we can endure together in relationship with one another. We can do that. But again, that narrative, that story is typically reserved for marriage. In marriage, you're supposed to endure with one another for the long haul. But in friendship, it's like, oh, friends come, they go. Like, you here today, you gone tomorrow. Blood is thicker than water. Like just stuff that we hear that, again, doesn't encourage leaning into community. And so that's kind of how I started. That's what I was seeing over the span of my own story and in my workspaces. And eventually was like, you know what? I'm just going to commit my life to this. And I've been doing it for about almost 3 years.
I think that's amazing, especially when you can when you can be an observer of life as you're living it and take that and like, okay, what do I have that I can pour back in? Like you being able to see that, being able to say, hey, let me help someone else, as opposed to y'all just need to get together,
Because let me just say this, that wasn't my story. Someone saw my brokenness, saw my unhealthy habits, saw my lack of awareness of how I showed up in spaces, and took the time to invite me into spaces of vulnerability, to endure with me when my guard was completely up and I had I don't have time for any of it. Like, I'm just here to do what I task over people all day long. Like, I don't care about these people. What are we here to do? Like that is how I flowed and functioned. And so, it was extended to me first, which is why I feel obligated to extend it to other people. And I don't think enough people are extending that example, that model, that patience, that grace to others as they are on their growth journey. We put a lot of pressure on people to be where we are, to think how we think, to be growing at the rate that we're growing. And had that been the standard for me, I would not be heart convos. I wouldn't be doing none of what I'm doing. And so much of my story is what it is because of the grace and love of other people, like, towards me. And so now I'm in a place where I'm legitimately trying to offer people, again, those resources so they can do it on their own, but really also spaces even online that facilitate some type of model or safe space for people to start their journey. I can't do life with everybody, you know what I mean? But I want to at least create some type of pockets of community where people feel like, okay, I can get started here, and it'd be okay if I quit today, come back tomorrow, quit 2 more days and then come back, or be like, cuss me out, you know what I'm saying? Come back, be like, you tripping, I don't want to hear none of this, and then be back in a month. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to create those spaces because that's how the journey goes, and people need room to grow like that.
Yeah, I definitely don't think that we know how revolutionary. The word that comes to mind for me is long suffering, or just sticking it out. Obviously, there's all the caveats of healthy spaces, but I don't think we realize how important it is to lean in, like how beneficial that is as opposed to leaning out. And so going back to the intro, we talked about you having conversations that matter. And so for me, it begged the question, what are the conversations that matter specifically, in regard to relationship, friendship?
Again, great question. It, Conversations that matter are conversations that are going to move the needle forward, right? It's going to help you take the step forward, help the seed to grow, like this watering and planting kind of mindset. If a friend calls you and is like, hey, you want to hang out tonight? We're all going to such and such to get food. This is also when we were living regular lives and could go places, but hey, do you want to go out tonight? We're going to go get food. If you don't feel like going, but you forfeit honesty, right, in that conversation, because for some reason you don't feel the freedom to be your most authentic self and just say no for whatever the reason is. It could just be, I just don't want to go. That's enough reason, right? But if you forfeit honesty and you're like, yeah, sure, I'd love to go out. That's not true. And that conversation isn't even worth having. You know what I mean? You might as well just not have picked up the phone, because all it's going to do is put you in a space you don't genuinely want to be in, to where then you feel like you have to pretend to be in a place that you're not in, which is going to later probably make you feel like you have in some way betrayed yourself. And it might not be deep. Like for some people, they are so used to preferring others above their own like needs that it's not really a deep issue until the levee breaks, so to speak. And then you just mad because you the thoughtful friend and don't none of your friends ever care about what you got going on in life. But prior to that, and sometimes for some people it's kind of like, why didn't I just feel the freedom to say no? I really didn't want to go. Like, why couldn't I have just said, yeah, not tonight, But then some people are conflict avoidant, right? So they're like, I don't want to say anything that's going to put the person in a position to push back, because that's just going to make me feel awkward and weird and like, ugh, and I don't like icky feelings. And so I'm just going to avoid all this. And so why am I giving these examples? These are just light surface examples of how people don't choose to have the heart combo, like opportunities where they can choose a heart combo, but they say no. And I ask, was it worth it? You know what I mean? Like, was it worth it to forfeit your rest or your quiet evening, or an evening that would have filled you in a way that going out doesn't? You get what I mean? Like, just to avoid the discomfort of someone being like, well, why not? It's like, I don't feel like it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but I'll catch y'all next, So the conversations that are worth having are conversations that add value to you and your life and your growth and your own self-awareness, that push the needle forward in conversations about heavy things. If we're going to have a conversation about race and justice, please let's not avoid all the elephants in the room for the sake of being politically correct. Like, like, let's address the things that people are having a hard time discussing, so that we can actually get somewhere in this conversation and not be back here tomorrow in another meeting talking about a remix version of what we said yesterday with no action, with no, you get what I mean? Like, what are we doing? We're just wasting time. So I don't think people like wasting time or energy. I think we like to conserve our energy and invest it in things that we feel like will give back to us, that will produce, even if it doesn't directly benefit us, but at least will benefit somebody else. And to me, having conversations that aren't honest doesn't benefit anyone. Having conversations where we're avoiding the issues don't benefit anyone. Having conversations with people who are pretending, it's like, well, who are we? We're all talking to imaginary people out here. Like, whoever I'm talking to ain't even a real you. That's what I mean when I say conversations that matter.
Yeah, no, I think that we are people that do not like wasting time. And yet, in so many of our conversations, as you're saying, I feel like we do just that. And yeah, it's like, it's not just that it doesn't benefit like the individual, me, it also doesn't benefit anyone else, that is engaging in this as well. And so it's like, yeah, it's a whole thing. So what is one of the biggest mistakes that you have found that people make in friendships? And it may be a piece of what you've already mentioned, but yeah, if not, I'd love to hear you share that.
So let me make sure I understand. What's one of the biggest mistakes that people make in friendship?
Yeah, that you have found that people make in regard to friendship, that leads to us being, as we said before, like trash friends, like a mistake that is like, this is kind of across the board, we regularly make and maybe don't even realize.
Yes. I think that we are constantly avoiding vulnerability, constantly looking for every opportunity to kind of, ooh, I don't really want to go there. I'm trying to, you can miss me with the vulnerability kind of thing. Even though, um, like Brene Brown will do a Netflix special and everybody will feel really encouraged about, about courage and want to do the thing. But then in the most simple of moments, again, we're not talking about your most egregious hurt and, like jumping off a cliff, but just in the opportunity you have to be vulnerable about how your day was. Again, we forfeit it. So I think something that's happening in friendships is that in friendships, there are oftentimes to lean in, like opportunities to lean into vulnerability, but we, for some reason, avoid them. And some of that is because we've embraced a narrative that the culture says that's not necessary or appropriate in certain spaces or whatever. And I'm like, and I would counter that and say, how's that going for you? Like, how's that working out for you at your job to feel like you can't actually talk about the things that matter or issues that come up, like in the office, and there's not a culture where, we can share vulnerably about what's going on here. Like, I'm not trying to bring my family drama to work. I'm just trying to talk about the dynamics that exist here. You know what I mean? And it typically takes the bridge collapsing or the whole building being blown up for people to finally look back and say, man, we should probably create a work environment that models cultural intelligence. You get what I mean? Like, or we should probably, reevaluate our power structure here. But why do people have to die for that to happen? You know what I mean? Like, why did the bridge have to collapse? Why the building got to blow up? Why does it have to be, oh, I got caught in the really, really, really big thing, before I start trying to deal with just the everyday principles of a thing. And so I think in friendship, what we're seeing is, friends have an opportunity to really love one another well. And again, practice being open and transparent and vulnerable with one another. But we forfeit it because we don't want to seem needy. We also have embraced that lie that being needy is like a thing. And I'm like, you guys know that we were born needy and we will die needy. And in between those 2 mile markers, we're needy. Like, I don't know when needy got like such a bad rap, like being needy got such a bad rap, but it is how we are meant to thrive. You know what I mean? But again, at some point we've been deceived to think that, no, I don't need anybody else. It's better for me to be able to pull myself up by my bootstraps and function autonomously and all those things. And I'm like, that has never been the case. You know what I'm saying? Like, ever before in your life, before you got some brains. And so we need to reevaluate how we're doing this. So I think friends constantly make the mistake of avoiding vulnerability. But if you would just try to practice it again in the smaller things, I think it will make for success in practicing vulnerability in the larger things.
Yeah, I think one of the most helpful things I have heard recently is that we need a willingness to be inconvenienced, but also a willingness to inconvenience. And so just hearing you talk about needy is just like, it's so simple, but it is like a huge truth because we don't do it. How are you? Okay. But you're not okay. Like, you don't have to spill everything in that moment, but you can be like, I'm making it, or it doesn't, and I've realized it is a choice you have to make daily to not just say okay, to not just say good, but to, it takes an effort to show up, essentially, what you're getting out as well.
You hit the nail on the head. It is a conscious effort every single day, not just to go through the motions. It isn't. It is. It is a conscious every single day and in every moment. At the day, you're like, all right, today I'm going to show up. And then the opportunity, you have to remind yourself in the moment, remember, I made a commitment today to show up. Today I'm going to show up, and if that means just pausing for a second, and kind of getting yourself together and really investing enough in yourself to know where you are any given day. I think a part of the reason why people are going through the motions is because when you ask them questions, they really don't have answers. Like, when you ask somebody like, hey, how you doing today? They don't know. Want to know why? Because they just put on the suit today and put on the role today, whatever the title is, whatever I'm just mom, I'm just wife, I'm just daughter, I'm just coworker, I'm just, And so when somebody literally looks you in your eye and says, like, you okay? And the person's like, oh yeah, I'm good. Because they haven't sat with themselves long enough to really give you a genuine, authentic answer. A mentor of mine, his name is Timotheus, he says you can only attach healthily to other people as much as you can attach healthily to yourself. You can only know other people as much as you know yourself. It's the difference and distinction between people who have deep, meaningful connections and people who don't, people who form healthy attachments and people who don't. You have to know your own narrative, your own story, be able to evaluate your own perspectives and beliefs and habits that ultimately shine through your character and your actions and your decisions and your behavior any given day, in order to show up well in a relationship with another person. Because ultimately, in the way that we're connecting with one another, we're asking things of each other. We're asking the other person to give up a right or privilege, you know what I mean, like to love us. We're asking the other person to be inconvenienced to love us. We're asking the other person to sacrifice to love us. We're also asking the other person to extend to a vulnerability, not just me always pouring and giving. We don't want those one-sided relationships. We want it to be mutual. We're asking the other person to trust, to be courageous, to be bold, to embrace us when we're not at our best. We're asking for a lot in relationships, going back to that needy piece. And when both people understand that it's a part that is normal and they're not shaming one another for having needs one, that's a whole thing. But they're meeting one another where they are. There's such an opportunity for growth and unconditional love. That same mentor, he says the formula for being, the most unconditionally loved and the most accepted in a relationship is the same exact formula for being the most egregiously hurt. Like, and you don't know, like, and vulnerability is the way to both. You get what I mean? Like, if I want you to love me, I have got to be vulnerable and expose myself to you. But I won't, because I'm not sure that you'll accept me. So then I just pretend for a little bit until I'm convinced that you'll accept me. And then I find out later that you did accept me, but the pretending version of me. And now, because I've embraced the fact that you've accepted the pretending version of me, I feel free to show up as my most authentic self. Hello, this is a new person showing up. So now they're looking at you like, who this? And you're like, well, why are you rejecting me? Because at the end of the day, the real you will always be rejected. And I tell that people all the time. You're either going to be rejected. The real you is either going to be rejected now, or the real you is going to be rejected later after you've invested a bunch of time, energy, and resources over a course of however many months trying to figure out if the other person was going to accept you or not. You get what I mean? And so choosing vulnerability is the biggest risk that anyone can take, because you don't know if the person's going to say, I see you and I love you, or I see you and I don't like it and I don't want it. So you can miss me with that, and again, it's a risk you take, but you'll be more likely to take that risk, to take that leap, if you have experienced the goodness on the other side of it. You know what I mean? Like, you just have to experience that goodness one good time, because it's such a satisfying feeling that you're like, I need this in all of my connections. You'll almost get to a place where you're like, oh, I'd rather not do any other thing. Like, I'd rather just risk figuring out who wants to be vulnerable with me, who wants to lean in with me. Like, because I know the joy and the acceptance and the goodness that exists there, then be pretending and doing all the other stuff. You know what I mean? Like, and wasting time.
Yeah, no, that is so true. And once we've experienced it too, I think, as you said at the beginning, like, you're more inclined to be that to someone else as well. Yes. So you had mentioned earlier, I think it was in our question about just being needy, and just the fact that, like, no one ever in life has picked themselves up by their bootstraps, just like solely their own person. And so my question is, like, in a society, like, we're constantly prioritizing individualism, even though we know, I feel like we know at the heart of it, we need people. And so my question is, because I view friendship as just another word for community. Why is community so important?
I think it's so important because we were made for it. Like, we were made to coexist. Like, and even if you're not a person of faith, you were not even brought into this world apart from how community functions. You know what I mean? Like, if you think about it, your mother and your father had to come together two humans had to commune with one another in order to even create you. So then you're created, and you don't come to fruition on your own. You need another human to carry you. You know what I'm saying? Like, and to birth, you're not hooked up to a machine. You know what I mean? You don't have a little, it's not a factory situation, you know, getting an arm and a leg. Like, that's not how this works. It's not a stork coming about it. Like, that's not how this goes, you know? And so then you're born and you're birthed through an individual into life, right? You know, reality. So now you're here. And even still, psychology will say, and again, we're not even talking about faith, but psychology will even say that children that do not have human touch, you get what I mean? That do not have community with another person struggle to develop, to grow, you get what I mean? To mature. And so if community is necessary to create you, you need another person to carry you and to birth you. Then you need another person to help you to sustain your life until you again become even more independent. But even we know then that you need other people to watch in order to know how to function. You know what I'm saying? And to learn and to see what to model. Like, and so in every way that we are designed to again grow, develop, and thrive, we need others. When we get to the place where it's like, I can function autonomously apart from any other being, you know what I'm saying? Like, I can just do this on myself. I think we have believed the biggest lie that has ever been told. And there's nothing but a path of destruction after that. And that destruction is, I mean, I think there's eternal destruction, but I also think just temporarily, I mean, there's again, loneliness, dissatisfaction, discontentment. There's a lack of knowing yourself. I don't think you can know yourself apart from other people. You know what I mean? And so, and even if a person's like, well, I don't have to go to school and I don't have to work a job and I can be an entrepreneur and work for myself and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, you still need some customers. You know what I'm saying? You need somebody to buy that product. You know what I mean? Like, you need someone else to invest in it. You know what I mean? To see the worth and the value in it. You know what I mean? To make it a thing. So again, people try to lie to themselves and tell themselves that they need no one or nothing. But again, it's a lie. It's a lie, and it does. And again, I would ask. I think if I was talking to somebody who genuinely thought everything you're talking about is foolish, I'd ask, "How's that going for you? Like, how's that working out for you? For real? Let's have a heart conversation about how you're doing. You know, mentally, emotionally, physically. You know what I mean? Are you fulfilled? Are you satisfied? And again, we're talking about interviews and books and, you know what I'm saying, like research from the wealthiest people who in the world, who have attained all of the success, have reached the top, who've climbed the ladders, who've done all of the things, who've given them, and would still say none of it is the same as having people to share that success with. You know what I mean? Like, without the people to share all of the success with or to give back to or whatever, like it's all in vain, and it's empty.
Yeah, yeah, just that perspective of even, you know, the coming together, the being carried. Yeah, I think it's just a beautiful analogy. But I even appreciate the approach of how that's going. Like, how is it going for you? Like, I'm going to pose a question, you know, because sometimes it's like, that's more effective than sitting here trying to like beat you over the head, trying to like, this is no, you tell me, you know, you take an observation and then we can, you know, we can go from there. So I even appreciate that approach.
I think we should take more of that approach of being curious about other people's stories and narratives, because I don't want to imply that a person's story has to be my story in order for it to work. I'm not saying that, because again, remember in the beginning, the goal for me is just to figure out what is true, not just in this one relationship, but in all of the relationships. You know what I mean? And there's a theme that we can see happening. That if there's someone who has figured out how to thrive apart from these themes that we see to be true in every relationship dynamic, I'm like, please tell me. You know what I'm saying? Like, please tell me how that's going. Like, I really do want to know. But what I have found, and I'm not saying I have it all figured out. I mean, I want to keep talking to folks and continue to hear other people's stories, because the theme that I'm seeing is that it doesn't go well for people who isolate themselves. And this is, again, listening to podcasts and researchers and reading books and, you know what I mean, like hearing interviews. And these are people who committed their whole lives to research, and they're saying it doesn't work, you know? So this is not just some random girl who's lived it herself, who's lived that emptiness herself. This is like, don't just listen to me. This is what's happening. And if you're the exception to the rule, please tell us how you have found, say how you've done it. So yeah, you're right. Being curious is always, I think, the better approach.
So what are your hopes for the future of Heart Convos? Because like you said, it's been 3 years. It's grown, I'm sure from the very beginning. And so when you look at, what may or may not, you view as your baby, where do you want this to be in the future?
So this is a very vulnerable question for me to answer, because I think the answer to this question scares me because it is far beyond me. I think the future of Heart Combos is vast. I think it is a game changer for the culture. I think it's revolutionary. I think it is I think it's good. And I mean, there's nothing new under the sun. So I'm not saying that it's like, oh, nobody's heard of this vulnerability thing. But like, no, like, nobody's heard of being honest. It's not that. I think what I am trying to create is a very practical, accessible, intentional community of individuals, and raise them up in a way of thinking and perspective and value that can be passed along to generations to come. It's not just, I mean, from a functioning standpoint, I'm like, again, these online, trying to create, new online spaces and ways for women to gather, and doing movie nights, and, friend speed dating stuff. And, just, I have an online membership, and I do a 14-day friendship challenge, and I have a private coaching group, and all those things are great. Like, but it's all to really impact the person with truth, encourage them in growing in that truth, and then sending them out to share that truth with other people and to live that truth daily. That is really all I am trying to do. Some people would say it sounds like discipleship, but which low-key, I mean, it is, like it is, what I have seen, my Savior do in coming and calling a few, to walk closely with him, which I have, and, do what Paul says. And then he's like, follow me as I follow Christ. Like, if you see anything good, maybe take that. If the other stuff, just go ahead and sit through it, but if you see anything good, take that, but then also there's this social media world that allows you to just, what I like to call scatter, where you just like, like just across, hopefully something lands, like, I don't know if this is actually landing on good soil, or if this is like gonna get choked out after you read the next Shade Room post. I don't know, what I mean? Like, I don't really know, but you're trying to just get as much out there as possible. And so that is really my heart, to give people truth, encourage them in that truth, watch them grow in that truth, and then live it and share it with other people. And none of this is my idea. I wish I was brilliant enough to take credit, but it ain't none of this is original. None of it. All of it has come from what I see laid out in the scriptures, and God graciously giving wisdom as he promises to give freely and without reproach, like, and so that's what I want for Heart Combos. But again, how I do that any given day or season of life is different. Some days it's friendship, other days, like literally dropping a biblical principle in a 15-second friendship, it just makes me so happy. Because I'm like, if somebody really sits and like thinks about this for too long, they're gonna be like, oh, like, and if for real, for the Christian, they be like, oh, that's Bible. Like, it is. Every piece of posted has a book, chapter, and a verse to it. I'm just not the one that's gonna go out there under the guise of, or the title of, anything official or formal. I'm just going out. I'm really just like, hey, listen, I was Jack. I've learned a little bit, and I want to share it with you. You know what I'm saying? And then we just gonna go from here. And so, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love it. And no, there is nothing new under the sun, but like, thank God truth is still, it still feeds us. It is still, yeah, just like real and beneficial and necessary. And so, yeah, I think the work that you are doing is not for naught. Yeah, I mean, I thank you for it. If nothing else, I thank you for it. And so, yeah, my last question for you is, what are your words to lift by?
Um, Words to lift by: love your neighbor. Those are my legit. Those are my words to live by right now. I think that everything that I would say that I believe can be summed up into that one statement: love your neighbor. I think it's the fulfillment of everything I say I believe. I think it's the way that other people know that what I believe is actually legit, Um, and every day I think it is my desire for the thing that I say that I believe and that I've committed my life to be evident in the way that I show up and how I treat people, how I speak, how I make my choices. And that's everything from how, where we live, how we spend our money, how we um, raise our daughter, how we um, address political, racial issues, even our career choices. There's so many other things that I could be doing that I'm sure would be far more lucrative and, and comfortable and convenient. A lot of what we've decided just here, with our family is that we will forfeit a lot of things for the sake of others. So yeah, that's those are the words that I try to lift by, because I honestly believe that when you humble yourself, under the mighty hand of God in the proper time, he will lift you up. And it's hard to believe that day to day sometimes, because I'm the most impatient person you'll ever meet. When I say I'm impatient, I mean I'm like, okay, like respectfully, like kind of thing, like, but any day now, kind of thing. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Like, why are we wasting time? Like, what are we, productivity, getting it done. And oftentimes in my own story, being is what I'm being told to do. Like, would you just go ahead and be? And I'm like, yeah, no. I don't want to do that. Mm-mm. And so I'm like, no, there's something I can contribute here. I can do something. I got some talents. I got a little personality. Like, let me, and it's like, yeah, but it's not, I mean, it's not really necessary. It's allowed, but we don't have to use that. You could just be. And I'm like, okay. So my words to live by: love your neighbor. And that includes my husband and my daughter, and it impacts everything.
Yeah, no, that is beautiful, and I resonate more than you know. Where can the listeners go to find about Heart Convos, about what you're doing? Like, just tell us, where can we find you? What do we need to be looking out for to stay plugged in and connected?
Yes. So, you know, one, let me just say thank you again for having me and allowing me to tell some of my story and just asking great questions. I love the space that you've created here. And again, it's always my pleasure and privilege to share. As far as where people can find me, Heart Convos everywhere. So HeartConvos on Instagram, on YouTube, on Facebook. I'm most active on Instagram. You have a monthly membership if you're like, hey, I just want to dive into all this content that this girl like has. You can go to heartconvos.com and find out what's going on there. As far as what's coming up next, I have a 14-day friendship challenge that I will launch mid-March. And so I don't know when this particular episode will air, but I'm really excited about that. It'll be the first one of the year. And I'm encouraging people who feel like they have great friendships, people who feel like they've just been struggling in friendships, they've hit a wall in friendships, they just need something new, like some type of refresher or encouragement or whatever. People who are loners, people who are surrounded by people but don't feel seen, whatever your narrative is. I encourage people to do the 14-day friendship challenge, because it's a 2-week experience where I commit to walking with a group of people through laying a healthy foundation or resetting the foundation of their friendship culture. And it's probably the heart and soul of what I do. Everything else is was kind of created out of the friendship challenge, because people finish it and they're like, well, what's next? And I'm like, I mean, the challenge was enough. But, my private coaching group and the membership, that was all kind of birthed out of the friendship challenge. The friendship challenge is kind of the starting point for anybody who's like, I want to just dive into all things Heart Combos. And so that's mid-March. Day one will start March 15th. The links to that will be available on the Heart Combos website eventually here, I think in the next week. And so, yeah.
Great. And I will post all of your social and your website on the show notes below. So everyone listening can find you there. Thank you. This has been an amazing conversation. And I know I was inspired. And so I'm excited for those that listen because they will be as well.
Yeah, I think so as well. Again, thanks for having me.
Thank you again for taking the time to listen to this episode of Here to Edify. This podcast can be found wherever you listen. And as always, I hope to catch you listening next time.